All right, let's go into one here from the pre-made questions. And they ask, how do I learn endangered languages with Refold? And we've done some similar questions on this before, but I think we can go through it pretty quickly. And so they're basically saying, what are your recommendations for incorporating traditional learning materials with more immersion style Refold learning? Because they're learning Irish, which is an endangered language with only 20 to 40K speakers. And Ireland is trying to preserve it by mandating education for school-age kids in Irish, I think, if I'm understanding what they said correctly. And on the flip side, there is some native content and media in Irish, but it's very limited. And so they're saying that it seems very silly to fully discount traditional language learning methods because things are so constricted, like this native content is constricted.
Totally.
And you absolutely can integrate both sort of more traditional classroom learning and just immersion stuff, which actually is going to make the traditional classroom way more effective. And especially that's like your main way to get contact with the language. It is a form of input. It's just a lot slower than other like more input dense methods where you are understanding a lot more of the language. And so you absolutely can get input, especially if the traditional classes are taught in the language. That's actually pretty solid in my opinion. And you basically have to be more creative and spend enough time with the language and try to feel it and understand it in a way that a speaker would, like a native speaker might, rather than just relying on that more traditional math-based approach, and try to connect with it more. If you can, find actual native speakers, do crosstalk, and that sort of thing. It's definitely a lot harder than if there's a language with a ton of content and stuff available, but it's absolutely doable. And if you find some interesting sources and just go down that route, you can absolutely make really good progress and be quite successful in helping to not necessarily revive the language, but to help at least revitalize the efforts and be a part of unendangering the language. I don't know if that's a phrase.
Bringing it back.
Bringing it back.
I would say that I think we should define what we mean by traditional language learning methods, because traditional, meaning like what you see in a classroom most often, I would say focuses on two things. One of which is a grammar focused or a grammar lens, learning language through grammar as the primary topic that you discuss in your classrooms. And then practicing that by using the grammar. And then I would say the other aspect of traditional classrooms is that they create a very narrow focus of what you are learning. And that narrow focus often does not map to the real language. So I would say those are the two main issues of traditional, or the main criteria of what I would consider traditional language learning, of grammar focus and niche or narrow non-native portion of the language that you're studying. But there's plenty of other things about traditional learning that are totally fine. You learn vocabulary in a traditional setting. That's important. You need to do that regardless of which direction you're going. You have access to a teacher who is speaking the language. That's great. I would even go so far as to say that like practicing the language in a classroom is good. It's just that you need to supplement it with exposure to the real language, because typically what they show you in a classroom is this artificially simplified version of the language. So that is why we emphasize media immersion, because you want to see what the language is actually, how it's actually spoken. And we emphasize vocabulary as the primary obstacle, because that is what is necessary to understand most of, that's the bulk of the challenge of understanding native media. Now, with an endangered language, I'm pretty sure that there's a sizable number of books that have been written in Irish Gaelic, and I'm sure that there are several YouTube channels dedicated to it. So I don't think that there's a lack of content. There's obviously way less than the popular languages. So I think that the challenge is actually going to be finding content that's interesting to you. Because if you don't care if it's interesting or not, and you're just like, you're ready to immerse in whatever they provide you, I imagine that there is more content out there in Irish Gaelic than you can possibly consume in your life. It's just, it may not be the kind of thing that you're interested in. Because of the endangered languages, it is one of the more popular from a modern content creation standpoint.
Yeah, I think that's a good overview, and hopefully that's helpful to you. I forgot to read the name of the person who asked the question, but thank you for your question.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing of how you can use a traditional environment. I think a traditional environment can absolutely reinforce the things that you learn through immersion.
Yeah.
Like, as you're learning things from the book, you use that as a way to acquire and solidify vocabulary and acquire and solidify the grammar knowledge. And then whatever you practice in your traditional classroom gets reinforced by what you're learning outside the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully creates a loop.